July 19th, 1916. A small village in northern France called Fromelles. In the fields surrounding this town, Australian and British soldiers were waiting in trenches for an order they knew would kill most of them. The ground was perfectly flat. No cover, no hills. Just open fields between their trenches and the German lines, 400 yards away. The Germans could see everything. They had had 18 months to fortify their positions. In 14 hours, 5,000 men would become casualties. The attack would gain nothing. No ground would be held. No strategic objective would be achieved. It would be remembered as the worst 24 hours in Australia's entire military history. By the summer of 1916, the Great War had become a stalemate of unimaginable scale. Along a front stretching hundreds of miles, millions of men faced each other across barbed wire and mud. Neither side could break through. Neither side would retreat. On July 1st, 1916, British forces launched the largest offensive of the war, the Battle of the Somme. The plan was to break the German line with overwhelming force, then push through to open country beyond. The first day was a slaughter. Nearly 20,000 British soldiers died, 60,000 casualties in total, the worst single day in British military history. And the battle continued, day after day, week after week, grinding through lives at an industrial pace. By mid-July, British commanders were desperate for anything that might ease German pressure on the Somme. They needed the Germans to divert troops, split their attention, and worry about other sectors of the front. 60 miles north of the Somme, near the border with Belgium, lay a quiet sector of the line around the village of Fromelles. Both sides held trenches there, but there had been no major fighting for months. It was considered a rest sector, somewhere exhausted units could recover. British command decided to stage an attack at Fromelles, not to gain ground, not to achieve any strategic objective, simply to convince the Germans that a major offensive might be coming in this sector, forcing them to keep troops there instead of sending them south to the Somme. The attack would be a diversion, a demonstration, in military terms, a feint. The plan was to assault German positions, hold them briefly if possible, then withdraw, make enough noise that German intelligence would take notice. It was a bad idea from the beginning. The battlefield at Fromelles was possibly the worst ground on the entire Western Front for an attacking force. Perfectly flat, no folds in the terrain, no dead ground where men could take cover. Just 400 yards of open field between the British trenches and the German lines. The Germans occupied a slight rise called the Ober Ridge. From their positions, they could see everything. For 18 months, German engineers had been improving these defenses. Concrete bunkers reinforced with steel, machine gun positions with interlocking fields of fire, barbed wire in belts 30 yards deep, drainage systems that kept their trenches dry even in winter. The German positions at Fromelles were among the strongest on the Western Front. British intelligence knew this. Reconnaissance reports documented the defenses in detail. Every staff officer planning the attack understood what they were sending men into. Making it worse, the sector was dominated by a German strongpoint called the Sugarloaf Salient. A fortified bulge in their line allowed them to fire into the flanks of any attacking force. Taking the Sugarloaf would require a frontal assault across completely open ground, directly into concentrated machine gun fire. The British plan called for a simultaneous assault along a mile of front. British troops would attack the Sugarloaf. Australian troops would attack the German lines to the south. Artillery would bombard German positions for hours beforehand, destroying wire and bunkers. Then the infantry would cross no man's land, occupy the German trenches, and hold them long enough to convince German command this was a serious threat. On paper, it looked achievable. On the ground, it was a death sentence. The Australian Imperial Force had arrived in France in April 1916. These were the survivors of Gallipoli, men who had already fought one disastrous campaign. They were experienced, well-trained, and under no illusions about modern warfare. The 5th Australian Division had been in the Fromelles sector for just 2 months. They were still learning the landscape, still adjusting to the Western Front. Some battalions had never been in a major attack. Their commander was Major General James Mackay, a lawyer in civilian life. A competent administrator, but not an experienced combat commander. He had reservations about the Fromelles plan. The ground was terrible. The defenses were too strong. The whole concept of a diversionary attack seemed wasteful. Mackay wrote to his superiors expressing concern. He was overruled. The attack would proceed as planned. The Australians would do their part. In the days before the attack, soldiers wrote letters home. Many had a sense of what was coming. The ground was visible from their trenches. They could see the German wire, the machine gun positions, and calculate the distance they would have to cover under fire. One soldier wrote, "We go over tomorrow night. The ground is very flat and they can see us clearly. I don't think many of us will make it across. If I don't come through, tell Mom I was thinking of her." His name was Private Simon Fraser. He was 19 years old. He would die in the first minutes of the attack. On the morning of July the 19th, British artillery began the preliminary bombardment. The plan called for 11 hours of continuous shelling to destroy German wire and bunkers before the infantry attack at dusk. 400 guns fired methodically at German positions. From the British trenches, it looked devastating. Shells burst along the German lines in continuous eruption. Smoke obscured everything. But the German bunkers were too strong. Most shells exploded on impact without penetrating the concrete. The machine gun positions were deep enough to survive anything but a direct hit. And the wire, that endless tangle of barbed wire, remained largely intact. Worse, the bombardment told the Germans exactly where the attack was coming. They had 11 hours to prepare, to position reserves, to ensure every machine gun was loaded and ready, to calculate exact ranges to every point in no man's land. At 11 in the morning, an Australian patrol went forward to check the wire. They reported it was barely damaged. The bombardment was not working. The attack should be postponed. The warning reached headquarters at noon, 7 hours before the scheduled assault. There was still time to cancel or delay the attack, to bring up more artillery, to cut the wire properly. Instead, headquarters decided the bombardment was adequate. The attack would proceed as planned. At 6 that evening, the artillery barrage would intensify for one final hour. Then, at dusk, the infantry would go over the top. 5 British battalions would attack the Sugarloaf. 8 Australian battalions would assault the German lines to the south. Nearly 20,000 men would cross no man's land in the first wave. At 6 o'clock, the bombardment reached its crescendo. Every available gun fired at maximum rate. The noise was overwhelming. Men in the trenches could not hear orders shouted from 3 feet away. The infantry waited with ladders ready. Some men were praying, some were silent. Some joked with forced casualness. All of them knew what the next hour would bring. At 6:30, the artillery suddenly stopped. The silence was shocking. For a moment, the battlefield was utterly quiet. Then whistles blew along the British trenches. The assault began. The Australian troops climbed out of their trenches and began walking toward the German lines. 400 yards of open ground, no cover, full visibility in the evening light. German machine guns opened fire immediately. Not scattered shooting, but coordinated, methodical fire from positions that had been registered for exactly this moment. The Germans had measured every yard of no man's land. They knew exactly where to aim. One witness described it. The German machine gun fire was the most intense ever witnessed on the Western Front. A continuous stream of bullets swept the field at waist height. Men fell in rows. Within minutes, the ground was covered with bodies. The first wave of Australian infantry was cut down before they reached halfway. Some men made it within 100 yards of the German wire. Almost none made it further. The wire was intact, exactly as the morning patrol had reported. Men who reached it were trapped, caught in the barbed wire while machine guns fired into them at point-blank range. Behind them, the second wave was already climbing out of the trenches. Officers could see the attack was failing, could see the wire was uncut and the machine gun fire was annihilating every wave. But the plan called for continuous waves. New orders would take time to transmit, so the second wave went forward into the same fire that had destroyed the first. In some sectors, entire companies were wiped out in less than 10 minutes. Officers died leading their men. Sergeants died trying to rally survivors. Medical orderlies died trying to reach the wounded. On the left flank, where British troops attacked the Sugarloaf, the result was even worse. The Strong Point's machine guns created a killing zone that nothing could cross. British battalions were destroyed almost completely. Some units lost 80% of their strength in the first 20 minutes. On the right flank, a small number of Australian troops did break through. They found gaps in the wire, rushed the German trenches, and actually captured a section of the front line. For a few hours, they held German trenches, taking prisoners and consolidating their position. It was the only success of the entire attack. A few hundred men in a few hundred yards of trench. They were now trapped behind German lines with no reinforcement possible and no way to retreat across the same ground that had killed thousands of their comrades. As night fell, the battlefield became a scene from hell. Thousands of wounded men lay in no man's land. Some were calling for help. Some were calling for water. Some were calling for their mothers. One survivor later testified, "The cries of the wounded went on all night. You couldn't go out to them. The machine guns were still firing at anything that moved. You had to lie there and listen to your mates dying, and there was nothing you could do." The Australian troops who had captured German trenches were now fighting for survival. German counterattacks came in waves. Artillery fire was falling on their position from both sides, German and British, because in the darkness no one could tell who held what. At midnight, orders came to withdraw. The diversion had failed. The attack had achieved nothing. The men in the German trenches should fall back while they still could. Getting back was as deadly as the attack had been. They had to cross the same 400 yards, now in darkness, still under fire. Many died on the return journey. Some got lost in the darkness and wandered into German positions. Some made it back to British lines only to be shot by their own sentries, who could not identify them. By dawn on July 20th, the Battle of Fromelles was over. It had lasted less than 24 hours. The British and Australian forces were back in their original trenches. The Germans still held all their positions. Nothing had changed except the casualty lists. The official casualty figures took days to compile. When they were complete, they revealed the scale of the disaster. British casualties, 1,547. Australian casualties, 5,533. Total Allied casualties, 7,080 in less than 24 hours. For comparison, Australia had lost 8,000 men during 8 months at Gallipoli. At Fromelles, they lost nearly that many in a single night. German casualties were approximately 1,500. For them, Fromelles was a defensive victory. They had held their positions against a larger attacking force and inflicted catastrophic losses. More significantly for British strategy, the Germans were not fooled. They recognized Fromelles as a diversion. Not a single German division was moved from the Somme. The attack achieved nothing it was designed to achieve. In the days after the battle, burial parties worked to recover bodies. Many men killed in no man's land could not be reached. They lay where they fell until dark, then were buried hastily in shell holes or mass graves. Hundreds were never identified. For weeks afterward, men could be heard in no man's land. Wounded soldiers who had crawled into shell holes or been trapped in collapsed trenches called for help that could not reach them because the ground was still under fire. One survivor wrote, "We could hear them for days. Then, one by one, they went silent. There was nothing we could do. That was the worst part, knowing they were out there and we couldn't help them. An inquiry was held immediately after the battle. Staff officers testified. Commanders explained their decisions. Casualty reports were reviewed. The inquiry concluded that the attack had been properly planned and executed. Casualties were regrettable, but within acceptable ranges for offensive operations. No one was held responsible. General Richard Haking, who commanded the operation, faced no consequences. He continued to hold command positions for the rest of the war. In his official report, he described Fromelles as a successful demonstration that had achieved its objective. The soldiers saw it differently. To them, Fromelles was not a demonstration or a tactical exercise. It was a slaughter caused by incompetent planning, impossible objectives, and commanders who ordered attacks they knew would fail. Private Lynch, who survived the attack, wrote in his diary, "They sent us to die for nothing. We knew it before we went over. They knew it too. But they sent us anyway because someone in a headquarters miles from the fighting thought a diversion would be useful. 5,000 men for a diversion that didn't even work." The wounded filled hospitals for months. Some recovered. Many did not. Injuries from machine gun fire at close range were catastrophic. Doctors performed amputations in assembly line fashion. Men who survived the crossing often did not survive their wounds. For those who did survive intact, there were other wounds. What they called shell shock. What we would now call post-traumatic stress. The nightmares. The inability to forget. The faces of friends dying in wire. The sounds of men calling for help that never came. The Battle of Fromelles broke something in the Australian Imperial Force. They had come to France as confident troops, veterans of Gallipoli, ready to prove themselves. After Fromelles, that confidence was gone. They still fought. They still won battles. But they never again trusted British command the way they had before. For 90 years, the men who died at Fromelles lay in unmarked graves. Many had been buried by the Germans in mass graves behind their lines. Others were lost in no man's land. Their bodies never recovered. In 2008, Australian researchers located a burial site at Pheasant Wood, just behind the German lines at Fromelles. Ground-penetrating radar revealed a mass grave containing hundreds of bodies. Excavation began in 2009. The remains of 250 soldiers were recovered, Australian and British. Most were identified through DNA analysis, dental records, and artifacts found with the bodies. Dog tags, buttons, personal items carried into battle. Each identification meant a family could finally know what happened to a man who had been missing for nearly a century. Letters were sent to descendants. Families who had waited generations for answers finally received them. The recovered soldiers were reburied at Fromelles Military Cemetery in 2010. Each grave was marked with a name. For the first time in 94 years, they were no longer missing. They were home. Among the identified was Private Simon Fraser, the 19-year-old who had written to his mother before the battle. His letter survived. His body had lain in Pheasant Wood since July 20th, 1916. In 2010, his family was notified. His great-niece attended the burial. She told reporters, "He's not missing anymore. We know where he is. That matters." The battlefield at Fromelles is farmland now. Quiet fields where crops grow. Walking across this ground, you would not know that 5,000 men became casualties here in a single night. But there are memorials. Australia built a remembrance park, a wall bearing the names of every Australian soldier who died or went missing at Fromelles, 5,533 names. In Australia, Fromelles holds a particular place in national memory, not because of what was achieved, but because of what was lost. An entire generation of young men from small towns and farming communities, sent to die in a battle their commanders knew was hopeless. Some towns lost dozens of men. The memorials list name after name from the same families. Brothers, cousins, friends who had enlisted together and died together in French fields thousands of miles from home. Every year on Anzac Day, Australians remember Fromelles alongside Gallipoli, the Somme, and other battles. But Fromelles is different. There was no victory to celebrate, no objective achieved, no ground gained that could be pointed to and called worth the cost. The survivors struggled to explain it. How do you justify 5,000 casualties for a diversion that didn't work? How do you make sense of friends dying in wire because someone thought their deaths might be useful? One elderly veteran said in a 1960s interview, "We did what we were ordered to do. We went over. Most of us didn't come back. And it didn't matter. Didn't change anything." That's the part that stays with you, that it didn't matter. The Battle of Fromelles lasted less than 24 hours. From 6:30 p.m. on July 19th to dawn on July 20th, 1916. In that time, 7,000 men became casualties. The attack failed completely. The diversion did not work. The strategic objective was not achieved. What remains is the human cost. The names on memorials, the letters sent home, the families who waited for news that never came, the bodies buried in mass graves and only identified 90 years later. Fromelles stands as a monument to the failure of command, to the gap between plans made in headquarters and reality experienced by men who had to execute those plans, to the cost of treating soldiers as expendable resources in pursuit of objectives that were not worth their lives. 5,533 Australian casualties. For nothing. That is Fromelles. That is what the worst 24 hours means.